All right, welcome back, everybody. This is the second part of part two, or part two Bravo, part 2B, however you want to look at it. And what we are going to be doing here is actually setting up the workflows that our MCP is going to use to actually accomplish whatever it is that it's supposed to do, right? So what do I mean by that? In this video, very specifically, what we're going to be looking at is we are going to be setting up the MCP server setter workflow, as well as the MCP server's getter workflow. So what is this really, what are we talking about here? Well, when we think about our MCP server, we have a client, right? In this case, we're just doing our TypeScript client, right? So we can verify our MCP server. And our client talks to our MCP server. Now, this communication, that is our client to the MCP server. But right now, we might have a client that knows how to talk to an MCP server, but that MCP server necessarily isn't doing anything yet. It's taking requests, but right now it's not doing anything with it, right? And this is what we set up in the previous video with our bear token and everything else. But our MCP server ultimately needs to be able to do something. And that's what we're going to be doing here, is actually setting up the functionality, which comes from workflows and N8N. We're going to be setting up the setter and the getter functionality for our MCP server, right? And so we're going to, in this case, our setter and our getter just write something to a Google Sheet and it retrieves that data later on, right? So we need to set up this functionality, and that's what we're going to be doing in this video. So right off the bat, the first thing that we're going to look at is setting up the setter, right? This is writing data to the Google Sheet. That's the first workflow that we're going to be setting up. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now. All right, so we've set up our MCP server. We're back here at our N8N dashboard. And what we're going to do now is we're actually going to create the setter of our MCP, right? When we looked at our graphics in the first video, we talked about how we were going to set a value and then read a value from a Google spreadsheet. And for this Google spreadsheet, right, this is pretty much it. This is all I have. I'm not worried about this over here. Right, we've got a name, date, whatever. We'll write some stuff in there and we'll read some stuff out. Now, in our N8N, we obviously need to set up the next node, which is going to be the setter that we're going to do first. So we'll go ahead and jump into that, but this is just one thing to keep in mind. This is just another workflow. It's not anything spectacular, right? So the first time, just so I can kind of test this out, I'm going to put in a webhook, or I'm going to do a manual trigger for this. And then I'm going to go ahead and just set up this whole node really quick, and then we'll come back and we'll kind of talk about it here in a minute. All right, so I've gone ahead and I've just set up a really quick workflow. This is standard stuff. Like here, there's nothing really going on that's particularly interesting. So if this part confuses you, you might want to take some other looks at some different videos on YouTube, but this is about as straightforward as I can kind of make something, right? So it's going to do a manual execution. The one part here in this JavaScript code, all that this is doing, and this, if you don't know code, which is fine, all I'm doing is getting the current date and I'm spitting it out in a format with the date of the month, day, year, as well as time. Just something, whatever, right? But this has nothing to do with MCP, so don't let this confuse you if you don't understand it, but it's just splitting out the time. That's it, current time. Now, down here in the edit fields, I just put in a hard-coded value because we don't have anything coming in yet. So at least this way I can test it, and we'll run it here in a second. So I just said name equals Joe, whatever, right? And so you can see the JSON that comes out of here. And then I pinned it just so we can run it with some pin data, whatever. Just some test data, who cares? And then in the merge node, I went ahead and I combined everything. So I combined everything from the JavaScript as well as the edit field, right? And so we have the date, time, the name, in this case, Joe, whatever. And so I can look at that, right? So in the merge, I just combine everything. I put the whole shindig in there, whatever. Now, in my conditional, I just want to make certain that if the name is not empty, I'm not going to, yes, I could add a conditional as date not empty, as time not, I'm just not worried about it right now. Whatever. If the name's not empty, I'm going to assume that everything else is pretty much good to go, right? And then in the writing to the actual spreadsheet, it just goes into this, food to delete, whatever. We looked at that a second ago. Sheet 1, the name and the date, right? So the time pretty much gets discarded anyways. So that's the basis of the setting, right? We'll call this what? Set info, whatever. And boom. So let's go ahead and just run this. And by the way, here's the spreadsheet, right? Whatever. Nothing in there. So we'll verify that the spreadsheet actually, or the workflow actually does what it says it's going to do. It looks like it's running through, executed successfully. We have Joe on the 31st of January, 2026, which in fact is today. So good to go. Hey, we've got our setter for the workflow up and running. We will come back and talk about what this actually is going to need to turn into. But before we do that, what I want to do now is develop and verify our getter function. And let's go ahead and we'll take a look at that here in just a second. All right, so we saw where the setter was getting configured and putting stuff out to a Google spreadsheet. We'll talk about the code in the date time here in just a minute. But we saw that the setter was our first piece of functionality for our MCP server, which was the setter workflow. Now what we're going to be working on next is our getter workflow. And this is the workflow that's going to retrieve information from our Google Sheet. All right, so let's go ahead and look at setting up the getter workflow for our MCP server. All right, so we're back here at our N8N dashboard. We're gonna go ahead and create a new workflow. I think in the last one for the set, I kept calling it a node, but whatever, it's a workflow. So here, it's, again, we're gonna keep things really straightforward for the time being. We have our manual trigger here. I'm just gonna go ahead and set this up with everybody here just really quick so we can kind of talk through things. And here what I'm gonna do is just put in name, I'm gonna capitalize it, and I will use the same string as we used earlier, because obviously if we're searching for something, we're gonna need to get the same string. Later on, we'll make this a variable from our MCP server, but again, just putting this together, verifying things. And then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pull in the sheets, and we will get a row this time. I have all my, obviously my documentation set up. I'm gonna go into the same sheet in the same document, good to go. And we are pretty much done from that perspective. Now, here, we need to make certain that our sheet, when we do filters, right? So we're gonna need to add a filter here. Select, we got a name, and we're just gonna make something happen here really quick. We run this, execute, we'll pin that, open this up, and we'll bring in the name, right? So you can kind of see how we did that, right? And so now if we go ahead and we execute this, we get back Joe on the 31st, whatever, row number. If we come here, right, this is 1, 2. So our getter is now working. So now that we go ahead and save this. we'll say get info. And now that that's saved, we'll go ahead and close this out, come back over into our working folder. And you can see that we have our get info, we have our set info, and we actually have our YouTube MCP server. So now we have everything at least working individually. And so what we're gonna do next is start to connect all of this stuff up, so then in the next video, we can actually call it from our client. All right, so we've seen the setter and the getter configured individually, right? We've got everything, we've got all the pieces set up now, but we haven't necessarily combined them all together. So we will look at that in the next video. But one of the quick notes that I want to bring up for this video is in the README file inside the repo, I'll put in a code fragment for the date time, just in case you want to copy and paste it. It'll be in the README file. If you want to copy and paste it directly into your own node inside of N8N, as long as it's JavaScript, you should be good to go. Again, I just wanted to put that out there. And for the repo on this one, it's still the same repo that we've been looking at all along. Now keep in mind that this repo is for the client code on the TypeScript. Even though I'm putting in this node for, or this code for the node inside the setter, generally speaking, all the code in here is going to be for the TypeScript, not the N8N, right? So that's why I'm walking you through getting all the N8N stuff set up. So just wanted to kind of put that out there. But anyways, the code is in there. It's in the README. Everything with the client is up there as well. So make sure that you go take a look. Obviously, this will be the code or the repo for part 2 when you take a look at the different branches. All right, so with all that being said, what we're going to do in the next video is take a look at putting these 3 disparate elements all together so we have a complete MCP server. So we will see you in the next video. Take care, everybody.